The 90s. What a time to be alive. A golden era when arcades weren't just places to play games, but magical realms where your quarters transformed into adrenaline, sweat, and sheer joy. The sounds of pixelated chaos, the glow of CRT screens, and the frantic click-clack of buttons. It was pure gaming heaven. Yeah, everyone remembers the heavy hitters like Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat, and Tekken. But what about the unsung heroes? The games that didn't dominate the spotlight, but still had the power to steal your time, thrill your senses, and empty your pockets just as effectively. That's what we're diving into today. The top 50 underrated arcade gems from the 90s. These are the games that might have flown under your radar back then. But trust me, they deserve a seat at the table of gaming greatness. From bizarre concepts and jaw-dropping visuals to ahead-of-their-time mechanics, these hidden treasures prove that the 90s arcade scene was bursting with creativity. So grab your joystick, metaphorically of course, and let's take a nostalgia-fueled ride down memory lane. Whether you're an arcade veteran or a curious newbie, this list will have something to make you say, wait, how did I miss this? Let's dive in, shall we? Oh, and don't blame us if you suddenly feel the urge to start hunting down retro cabinets after this. Consider that your bonus level. Ninja Baseball Batman, 1993. Ever wondered what would happen if you threw baseball, ninjas, and superheroes into a blender? Well, someone at IREM did exactly that in 1993, and the result was the absolutely bonkers Ninja Baseball Batman. This game is what you'd get if the MLB decided to solve its problems with martial arts instead of million-dollar contracts. The premise is pure arcade gold. The Baseball Hall of Fame has been robbed because apparently regular security guards weren't ninja enough, and it's up to 4 baseball-themed superheroes to save America's most precious baseball artifacts. Our heroes aren't your typical bench warmers. They're actually inspired by real MLB stars of the time, including nods to legends like Jose Canseco and Ryan Sandberg. Talk about a dream team that could literally knock it out of the park. Think of it as a beat-em-up, where instead of brass knuckles, you're wielding baseball bats and throwing ninja stars like they're fastballs. Each character comes with their own unique moveset, and when your health bar flashes red, you can unleash some seriously wild special moves that would make any umpire's head spin. The game even features cheerleaders who occasionally show up to help you clear the screen of enemies, because nothing says baseball ninja quite like a Spirit Squad backup. Out of 1,042 units produced, only 50 made it to North America. That's fewer units than a typical MLB roster. The game was actually a hit in Japan, but in the US, it struck out commercially. However, thanks to MAME emulation, this hidden gem has finally found its audience years later, proving that sometimes the best games are like fine wine. They just need time to be appreciated. The game's unique fusion of American baseball culture with Japanese gaming sensibilities created something truly special, even if it took decades for players to realize it. The Outfoxies, 1994. Before Super Smash Bros. Made platform fighting cool, the Outfoxies was serving up deliciously chaotic multiplayer mayhem with a side of assassination. This Namco gem from 1994 is what you'd get if John Wick decided to start a fight club and invited all his hitman friends to duke it out in the most ridiculous locations possible. Picture this: a roster of professional assassins, each with their own twisted backstory, competing to become the world's deadliest killer. We've got a wheelchair-bound mad scientist who turns his chair into a death machine, a circus acrobat who probably missed the memo about circus acts being fun and family-friendly, and even a pair of killer dolphins, because apparently Flipper needed a career change. The character design is so over the top, it makes modern fighting games look tame in comparison. The gameplay was light years ahead of its time. While other fighting games were stuck in their 2D lanes, the Outfoxies said, "Hold my weapon," and introduced dynamic, multi-level stages that would literally fall apart during fights. You could swing from chandeliers, ride elevators, and use everything from machine guns to household items as weapons. Ever wanted to defeat your opponent with a well-aimed coffee pot? This game lets you live that dream. The stages themselves are practically characters, ranging from crumbling skyscrapers to speeding trains, each filled with more environmental hazards than a Home Alone movie. The game introduced concepts like weapon pickups, interactive environments, and multi-level combat years before they became industry standards. It was essentially the blueprint for modern party fighting games, but due to limited arcade distribution and the dominance of traditional fighting games in the 90s, it never got the spotlight it deserved. Today, it's considered a prophetic masterpiece that was simply too ahead of its curve, proving that sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places, like homicidal dolphins in business suits. Strikers, 1945-1995. In the summer of 1945, just when everyone thought they could finally kick back and enjoy some peace after World War II, Sikyo said, "Hold my joystick," and delivered one of the most criminally overlooked vertical shooters of the arcade era. While everyone was busy playing Street Fighter II, this gem was quietly revolutionizing the shoot-'em-up genre with style and substance. The plot is deliciously bonkers. Just when the world thought it was safe, a mysterious organization called CANY, apparently they couldn't afford more vowels, emerges with super weapons that would make Einstein scratch his head. Plot twist, they're actually aliens, because obviously, the only thing better than defeating Nazis is shooting down extraterrestrial troublemakers who decided to crash Earth's victory party. Each aircraft comes packed with 3 different attacks: your basic pew-pew shot, a charged blast that'll make your enemies reconsider their life choices, and a screen-clearing bomb for those "I immediately regret this decision" moments. The real genius lies in the risk-reward system of the charge shots. It's not just about holding a button and hoping for the best. You've got to decide whether to sacrifice your close-range defense for some serious long-range firepower. The stages might be shorter than a coffee break, but they pack more punch than a caffeinated kangaroo. Plus, the game rewards skillful play with a clever medal system based on your performance, giving players a reason to come back beyond just bragging rights. Despite its limited initial release, Strikers 1945 has aged like fine wine, spawning multiple sequels and ports, proving that sometimes the best games are the ones that fly under the radar. Elevator action returns, 1995. If John McClane had an arcade game in the 90s, this would be it. Minus the barefoot running and with 100% more elevator hopping action. Taito's sequel to their 1983 classic took everything that made the original great and cranked it up to 11, creating what might be the most stylish action game about riding elevators ever made. The setup is pure 90s action movie gold. 3 special agents must infiltrate various buildings to stop a terrorist organization called the Wizard Group. Clearly, the evil naming department was on vacation from unleashing chemical weapons. Our heroes include Cart Bradfield, who looks like he raided every 90s action hero's wardrobe, Edie Burrett, proving that high heels and explosives are a perfect match, and Jad, the Navy SEAL, because every 90s game needed at least one military character. Unlike its predecessor's more methodical pace, Returns throws you into a bullet ballet of explosions, sliding down zip lines, and yes, lots of elevator action. The game introduces a revolutionary damage system where you can actually shoot specific parts of enemies' bodies. Want to disarm that terrorist? Shoot their gun hand. Need to slow someone down? A leg shot will do the trick. It's like playing Operation, but with bullets instead of tweezers. Each level is packed with destructible environments that would make Michael Bay proud. Oil drums explode, gas tanks become impromptu rocket launchers, and windows shatter in gloriously detailed animation. The co-op play is particularly brilliant, allowing players to coordinate their attacks and create strategies that would make any SWAT team jealous. Despite all these innovations, the game remained relatively obscure outside Japan, possibly because by 1995, 2D games were being overshadowed by the 3D revolution. However, those who've played it know the truth. Sometimes the best action games are the ones that take place between floors. Armored Warriors, 1994. Capcom looked at their beat-em-up formula and thought, you know what this needs? Giant robots that can swap body parts like Mr. Potato Head. Thus was born Armored Warriors, a game that makes Pacific Rim look like a casual stroll through the park. Set in the year 2281, when apparently all international disputes are settled by massive mechanical throwdowns, you pilot a customizable mech through war-torn cities and alien landscapes. The story follows the Armor Force trying to prevent an interplanetary war, because nothing says peace negotiations quite like a 50-foot robot with chainsaw arms. The plot might sound familiar, but the execution is anything but standard. Forget everything you knew about beat-em-ups. Armored Warriors introduces a revolutionary body part collection system that would make Dr. Frankenstein jealous. Destroy an enemy mech? Swipe their parts. Want legs from one bot, arms from another, and a torso from a third? Go for it. It's like a Build-A-Bear workshop, except everything is made of metal and shoots missiles. Each combination affects your mech's speed, power, and special abilities, creating literally hundreds of possible combinations. You can even pick up smaller mechs and use them as temporary weapons, which is probably the most satisfying way to beat up other robots ever conceived. The sprite work is gorgeous, with mechs that move with surprising grace for giant chunks of metal. The sound design makes every punch feel like a thunderclap, and the environmental destruction would make Godzilla nod in approval. The game even features branching paths and multiple endings, giving players reason to come back for more mechanical mayhem. Despite all these innovations, Armored Warriors never got the recognition it deserved, possibly because it was released when fighting games were dominating arcades. However, its influence can be seen in later mech games, proving that sometimes the best ideas come from games that slip through the cracks of history, like a well-oiled robot ninja. Cyberbots, Full Metal Madness, 1995. If Street Fighter and Gundam had a baby that was raised by Transformers, you'd get Cyberbots, Capcom's criminally overlooked mecha fighting game that makes Rock'em Sock'em robots look like a preschool toy. This 1995 gem is actually a spin-off of Armored Warriors, proving that sometimes the best ideas come from, hey, what if we made those giant robots fight each other one-on-one? The game's plot is pure 90s anime chaos, set in a dystopian future where corporations rule everything. Shocking, right? Pilots called Variant Armor Riders duke it out in massive mechanical suits. Each character comes with their own soap opera-worthy backstory, including Jin Saotomi, whose hot-blooded personality would make even the most extreme anime protagonists say, maybe tone it down a bit. The real stars, though, are the mechs themselves, massive, detailed war machines that transform and combine with the grace of a ballet dancer wearing rocket boosters. Unlike traditional fighting games, you choose both your pilot and your mech separately, creating combinations more diverse than a buffet at an international food festival. Each mech has multiple forms and attack patterns, and the dash-based combat system makes battles feel like high-speed robot jousting matches. The game introduced mechanics that were way ahead of their time, like destructible limbs, air-to-ground combat, and special moves that would make Michael Bay weep tears of explosive joy. The animation is smoother than buttered chrome, with mechs that move with surprising agility despite looking like they weigh more than a small country. The sound design makes every punch feel like a thunderclap in a metal factory, and the special moves are basically small light shows that would put Times Square to shame. Despite being a technical marvel and featuring some of the most unique fighting game mechanics of its era, Cyberbots remained relatively obscure outside Japan. Maybe it was too complex for casual players, or maybe people weren't ready for fighting games where you could literally throw a skyscraper at your opponent. Either way, it's a forgotten masterpiece that deserves more love than a lonely robot in a scrapyard. The Cliffhanger, Edward Randy, 1990. If you've ever wondered what would happen if someone made an arcade game by throwing Indiana Jones, Jackie Chan movies, and every 80s action trope into a blender, Data East answered that question with The Cliffhanger, Edward Randy. This 1990 hidden gem is what you'd get if Hollywood decided to make action movies exclusively using playground equipment and questionable physics. Meet Edward Randy, a fedora-wearing adventurer whose solution to every problem is either swinging on something or kicking it in the face. The plot follows our hero as he tries to stop an evil organization from acquiring ancient artifacts, because apparently in the 90s that was everyone's favorite hobby. But forget the story, because this game is all about style, specifically the how many different ways can we make our hero look cool while defying gravity kind of style. Unlike other beat-em-ups of the era that kept you grounded, Edward Randy spends more time in the air than most airline pilots. The game's unique active play system lets you swing from virtually anything: ropes, poles, chandeliers, enemy helicopters. Yes, really. And probably your own shoelaces if you try hard enough. Combat isn't just about punching, it's about punching while swinging from a rope, while sliding down a zip line, or while hanging upside down from a ceiling fan. Each stage is essentially a giant playground designed for maximum swashbuckling potential. The game constantly throws new scenarios at you, from minecart chases that would make Temple of Doom jealous to boat sequences that somehow involve more aerial acrobatics than water navigation. The sprite work is gorgeous, with Randy moving like a gymnast who's had way too much coffee, and the environments are packed with interactive elements that would make modern game designers blush. Despite its groundbreaking mechanics and pure entertainment value, the Cliffhanger never got the recognition it deserved, possibly because it was too unique for its own good. It's like that one kid in high school who was really good at everything but never made it into any yearbook photos. Criminally overlooked, but absolutely legendary to those in the know. Boogie Wings, 1992. Imagine if someone took a traditional shoot-'em-up, threw in some steampunk aesthetics, added a grappling hook and said, you know what? Let's let players steal everything that isn't bolted down, and even the things that are. That's Boogie Wings, also known as the Great Ragtime Show in Japan. A game so wonderfully bizarre, it makes other shoot-'em-ups look positively boring in comparison. The premise is pure madcap genius. You're a sky pirate in an alternate 1920s world where everything is powered by steam, and apparently gravity is more of a suggestion than a law. Your mission? Fly around in a biplane that's equipped with the world's most ambitious grappling hook, stealing everything from enemy vehicles to circus animals and using them as weapons. Yes, you read that right. You can literally grab an elephant and use it as a wrecking ball. Take that, physics. Your biplane comes equipped with standard shooting capabilities, but the real star is the grappling hook system. See an enemy tank? Hook it and swing it around like a medieval flail. Spot a hot air balloon? Grab it and use it as a temporary shield. The game essentially turns into an aerial version of If You Can See It, You Can Steal It. The levels are designed like elaborate playgrounds of destruction, filled with interactive elements and physics-based mayhem that would make Rube Goldberg proud. The game constantly surprises players with new things to grab and swing, from circus performers to entire buildings. The steampunk art style is gorgeous, with detailed sprites and backgrounds that look like they were ripped straight from a Victorian fever dream. The music, true to its alternate title, is a delightful mix of ragtime that perfectly complements the crazy on-screen action. Despite being one of the most innovative shoot-'em-ups ever made, it remained relatively obscure, possibly because it was just too weird for mainstream success. But those who've played it know the truth. Sometimes the best games are the ones that dare to ask, what if we let players use a grappling hook to turn everything into a weapon? Dungeons & Dragons: Shadow over Mystara, 1996. In 1996, Capcom decided to take everything awesome about Dungeons & Dragons, mix it with their beat-em-up expertise, and create what might be the most ambitious arcade game of its era. Shadow over Mystara isn't just a button masher, it's a full-blown RPG adventure that happens to let you punch dragons in the face. The game throws players into the fantasy realm of Mystara, where a mysterious sorceress named Sin is causing more trouble than a cat in a yarn factory. What starts as a typical Save the Kingdom quest eventually reveals itself to be an epic confrontation with a centuries-old red dragon who's apparently been taking evil overlord lessons. The plot twists harder than a rogue trying to avoid trap damage. Picture a beat-em-up that went to RPG college. You've got 6 distinct character classes, each playing completely differently. Want to be a cleric who bonks evil with a morning star? Done. Prefer to be a magic user who makes things explode from a safe distance? You got it. The game introduces Street Fighter-style special moves, letting you pull off combos. There's even a complex inventory system where you can collect, use and trade items like some sort of medieval shopping spree. The game is packed with hidden items, multiple paths and secret endings that would take a wizard's lifetime to discover. Every boss fight feels like an actual D&D encounter. The troll regenerates unless you use fire, and the beholder can shut down spellcasters with its anti-magic eye. It's like Capcom had a team of D&D nerds working overtime to make sure every detail was perfect. Despite being one of the last 2D arcade side-scrollers Capcom ever made, it stands as a testament to what happens when you perfectly blend two genres together, like a critical hit of game design. Knights of the Round, 1991. Before Dark Souls made medieval combat brutally fashionable, Capcom gave us Knights of the Round, a beat-em-up that turns Arthurian legend into a heavy metal album cover come to life. This 1991 masterpiece asks the important question: what if King Arthur solved all his problems by punching them really hard? The game follows Arthur, pre-kingship, when he was just a sword-pulling upstart, Lancelot, the pretty boy who probably spends more time on his hair than fighting, and Percival, the absolute unit who makes other knights look like squires. Together, they're on a quest to unite Britain by introducing every enemy's face to their weapons. The story plays faster and looser with Arthurian legend than a medieval bard after too much mead, but who needs historical accuracy when you have dragons to punch? The gameplay introduces revolutionary features that were way ahead of their time. Each character actually levels up during gameplay, gaining new armor, weapons, and attack patterns, making this one of the first beat-em-ups with RPG elements. Your character's appearance changes with each level up, going from peasant with pointy stick to walking tank of doom. The combat system includes blocking, a rarity in beat-em-ups, mounted combat, because everything's better on horseback, and special attacks. The attention to medieval detail is impressive. Enemies actually block with their shields, armor affects damage taken, and you can even deflect arrows with proper timing. The game's unique leveling system gives players a real sense of progression, unlike other beat-em-ups where you're just as strong at the end as you were at the beginning. The music sounds like what would happen if a medieval orchestra discovered power metal, and the sprite work is gorgeous, with characters moving like they're actually wearing heavy armor instead of pajamas. Despite all these innovations, it often gets overshadowed by Final Fight and other Capcom hits of the era. However, those who've played it know that sometimes the best games are the ones that let you suplex a knight while wearing full plate armor. Moonwalker, 1990. This game's plot is pure 80s movie magic. Mr. Big, no relation to the band, has kidnapped children, and only Michael Jackson, armed with his signature moves and a sparkly suit, can save them. It's like Home Alone meets West Side Story, but with more sequins and less practical solutions to home invasion. Each stage transforms MJ into a one-man dance army, proving that sometimes the best weapon against crime is a well-timed crotch grab and a hee-hee. Instead of traditional punches and kicks, you fight using dance moves that somehow send thugs flying across the screen. Your special attack? A dance routine so powerful it forces everyone on screen to join in before they collapse from exhaustion, because nothing defeats evil quite like mandatory dance participation. You can even transform into a robot or spaceship, because apparently that's just something Michael Jackson could do in this universe. The game features some of the smoothest animation of its era, with Michael moving exactly like his real-life counterpart. Each stage is backed by a different MJ hit, with enemies attacking in sync with the music. The co-op mode lets 3 players control 3 different coloured Michael Jacksons, creating what might be the most surreal multiplayer experience in arcade history. Despite its unique premise and solid gameplay mechanics, the game never achieved the same legendary status as other beat-em-ups of its era. Maybe it was too weird for mainstream success, or maybe people weren't ready for a game where you defeat mobsters by making them dance to Billie Jean. Either way, it stands as a testament to a time when game designers weren't afraid to ask, what if we made Michael Jackson fight crime with the power of dance? Battle Circuit, 1997. When most developers were going 3D, Capcom delivered Battle Circuit, quite possibly the most wonderfully insane beat-em-up ever created. Imagine if someone took every 90s anime trope, mixed it with Saturday morning cartoons, and sprinkled in some cyberpunk seasoning. The game is set in the year 20XX, because specific dates are for cowards, where you play as bounty hunters in a world that makes Blade Runner look tame. Your roster includes a pink ostrich-riding girl named Cyber Blue, a plant man who'd make Poison Ivy jealous, a shape-shifting alien wearing a yellow suit, and a cybernetic woman who fights with her hair. If you think that sounds wild, wait until you meet the villains. One of them is literally a disco-dancing superhero gone rogue. The gameplay takes everything great about beat-em-ups and cranks it up to 11. Each character has unique moves that can be upgraded using money collected from beaten enemies. Think Street Fighter meets RPG meets Acid Trip. Want your plant man to shoot bigger fireballs? Done. Need your ostrich to learn a spinning breakdance kick? Why not? The game features a move buying system that lets you customize your character's abilities, creating combos that would make even veteran fighting game players dizzy. The sprite work is gorgeous, with some of the most fluid animation seen in the genre. The stages are a Technicolor fever dream, taking you from neon-lit cityscapes to space stations, all while fighting enemies that look like they were designed by a committee of sugar-rushed anime fans. The co-op play is particularly brilliant, allowing players to combine their special moves for devastating team attacks. Despite being one of Capcom's last 2D beat-em-ups, and arguably their most creative, Battle Circuit never got the recognition it deserved, possibly because by 1997, arcades were already on the decline. Power Instinct, 1993. This next game revolves around the Goketsuji clan, a family that apparently solves inheritance disputes through organised fighting tournaments, because nothing says, "I deserve Grandma's fortune," quite like a roundhouse kick to the face. The star of the show is undoubtedly Ume Goketsuji, a 78-year-old grandmother who can transform into her younger self and throw her dentures as projectiles. Yes, you read that right. This game lets you play as a fighting grandma who uses her false teeth as weapons. Take that, Ryu. While it features the standard fighting game mechanics of the era, Power Instinct adds its own bizarre twist to everything. Characters can double jump because gravity is optional, throw random objects they pull from nowhere, and unleash super moves that would make anime characters blush. Want to summon a horde of tiny duplicates? Go for it. Feel like turning into a heavy metal guitarist mid-fight? This game's got you covered. The character roster reads like a fever dream. A housewife who fights with kitchen utensils, a white-collar worker who transforms into a tribal warrior, and a little girl who rides a dog into battle. The stages are just as crazy, featuring everything from traditional dojos to disco clubs. The music switches between traditional Japanese themes and rock covers faster than Grandma's transformation sequence. Despite having tight gameplay mechanics and some of the most innovative character designs of its era, Power Instinct was overshadowed by bigger fighting game franchises. However, it remains a testament to what happens when developers aren't afraid to get weird. Really, really weird. Three Wonders, 1991. Capcom basically blessed the arcade world with Three Wonders, a game pack that's essentially three completely different games having an identity crisis together. It's like getting 3 scoops of ice cream, but each scoop is trying to win most unique flavour of the year. First up is Midnight Wanderers, or as I like to call it, what if Mega Man went on a fantasy adventure? You play as cute little elves with magical shots fighting through a world that looks like a fairy tale had a baby with a shooting gallery. The platforming is tighter than a dragon's grip on its gold, and the character designs are so adorable they could give Kirby diabetes. Then there's Chariot, which takes the characters from Midnight Wanderers, straps them into flying machines, and turns everything into a horizontal shooter. Think Gradius, but with more whimsy and less existential space dread. The game lets you collect little helper creatures that act like tiny, adorable weapons of mass destruction. It's basically what would happen if someone turned a pet shop into a military arsenal. Finally, there's Don't Pull, the weird cousin of the bunch. It's a puzzle game where you play as a rabbit scientist, because why not? who needs to clear blocks by pushing around enemies. Imagine if Bomberman went to college and got a PhD in block pushing. The puzzles start simple, but quickly become more devious than a fox running a hedge maze competition. The platformer has better mechanics than many dedicated platforming games of the era. The shooter portion features some of the smoothest controls and most creative power-ups in the genre. And the puzzle game? It's clever enough to make you feel like a genius when you solve its later stages. Despite packing triple the content of most arcade games, Three Wonders never got the recognition it deserved. Maybe it was too ambitious, or maybe players in 1991 weren't ready for a game with multiple personality disorder. Either way, it stands as one of Capcom's most innovative arcade experiments. Dungeon Magic, 1994. Before Elder Scrolls made first-person fantasy cool, Taito created Dungeon Magic, Lightbringer, in Japan, a game which was a beat-em-up, but from a first-person perspective. The result was a genre-bending masterpiece that plays like Streets of Rage had a baby with Doom. The story follows four warriors, because apparently saving the world is always a four-person job, on a quest to defeat the Dark Lord Darcis, a villain who clearly got his name from the generic Evil Overlord handbook. Each character brings their own unique fighting style. A knight, who's basically a walking tank, a ninja who moves like he's had too much coffee, a wizard who thinks the best solution is setting everything on fire, and a brawler who punches first and asks questions never. You can punch, kick, block, and unleash special moves, all from a first-person view that makes every hit feel more personal than a Dragon's Revenge quest. The game even features combo systems and juggle mechanics. Try imagining pulling off a juggle combo in first-person view. It's like Street Fighter decided to get really close to the action. The game seamlessly combines beat-em-up mechanics with first-person exploration and RPG elements. You can find hidden rooms, upgrade your character's abilities, and even use magic spells that would make most fantasy games jealous. The environments are surprisingly interactive. You can break barrels, smash furniture, and generally wreak havoc like a bull in a medieval china shop. Despite being years ahead of its time with its unique perspective and combat system, the game remained relatively obscure. Maybe players weren't ready for a first-person punching simulator, or maybe the idea of seeing your fist connect with a skeleton's face in first person was too intense for 1994. Either way, it stands as one of the most innovative arcade games that dared to show fighting games from a whole new perspective. The Last Blade, 1997. SNK looked at their fighting game lineup and decided to create something that would make their own Samurai Shodown look tame by comparison. The Last Blade isn't just a fighting game, it's a playable piece of Japanese art where every slash of the sword tells a story, and every animation frame could be hung in a gallery. Set in the twilight years of Japan's Bakumatsu period, when samurai were facing extinction and supernatural forces were running amok, The Last Blade tells a tale darker than a moonless night. The story follows warriors trying to seal Hell's Gate before demons overrun Japan, because apparently the end of the samurai era wasn't dramatic enough on its own. Each character carries their own heavy burden, from revenge-seeking ronin to duty-bound shrine maidens, making the typical fighting game roster look about as deep as a puddle. The gameplay introduces the revolutionary speed and power system, essentially letting players choose between being quick as lightning or hitting like a thunderbolt. Speed mode lets you chain combos faster than a poet writing haiku, while power mode turns every hit into a devastating statement. The parry system is so precise it makes other fighting games look clumsy in comparison. Each clash of blades creates a dance of death that's more beautiful than cherry blossoms in spring. The animation is so fluid it makes water look rigid. Every character moves with purpose, from the way they sheathe their sword to how their clothes flutter in the wind. The soundtrack blends traditional Japanese instruments with modern composition to create something that sounds like what would happen if a shamisen player joined a symphony orchestra. Despite being technically and artistically superior to many of its contemporaries, The Last Blade was overshadowed by flashier fighting games of its era. However, like a master swordsman, it doesn't need to shout to prove its worth. Its excellence speaks through every perfectly executed frame. Vendetta, 1991. Before Streets of Rage became the king of street brawling, Konami dropped Vendetta, Crime Fighters 2 in Japan, a beat-em-up that makes the warriors look like a playground scuffle. This game is what happens when someone watches too many 80s action movies and decides to turn the urban vigilante dial up to 11. The plot is straight out of a B-movie marathon. The Dead End Gang, apparently all the good gang names were taken, has kidnapped your friend's girlfriend. And the only reasonable response is to punch your way through the entire city. You and up to 3 friends play as members of the Cobra team, a group of vigilantes who apparently shop at the same sleeveless jacket store and solve all their problems with flying knees to the face. The gameplay takes everything great about beat-em-ups and adds a healthy dose of brutality. Your moves include suplexes that would make wrestlers wince, face-grinding attacks against walls, and the ability to literally pick up one thug and throw them at their friends like a human bowling ball. The game introduces a unique angry mode where your character becomes temporarily invincible after taking too much damage, because nothing says street justice quite like glowing red with rage and becoming an unstoppable punching machine. The game features some of the most varied enemy designs in the genre, from mohawked punks to suited mobsters, each with their own fighting styles. The environmental interaction is ahead of its time. You can slam enemies into phone booths, throw them through windows, or use objects like baseball bats and trash cans as weapons. The co-op play is particularly chaotic, allowing players to team up for devastating combo attacks or accidentally hit each other in the heat of battle. Despite being one of Konami's most polished beat-em-ups, it often gets overshadowed by Final Fight and Streets of Rage. However, those who've played it know that sometimes the best street brawlers are the ones that aren't afraid to get their hands really, really dirty.
No mercy. Attack!
Red Earth, 1996. With this next game, Capcom decided to throw convention out the window and create a fighting game that plays like an RPG, had a fever dream. Red Earth, known as Warzard in Japan, was the first game to run on Capcom's powerful CPS-3 hardware, and boy did it make an entrance. The game follows 4 unique heroes: a cursed Lion King named Leo, a ninja called Kenji, a quirky witch named Tessa, and a martial artist Mai Ling, as they battle against 8 massive boss monsters in a medieval fantasy world. Think Street Fighter meets Dungeons & Dragons, but with more transforming harpies and dinosaurs with ram horns. Red Earth features a full RPG progression system where characters level up, unlock new special moves, and even acquire better weapons. Want your Lion Man to hit harder? Keep playing and watch him go from wielding a basic sword to swinging legendary weapons that would make Final Fantasy heroes jealous. The game even includes a password system that lets you save your progress. Pretty fancy for an arcade game in 1996. The game features some of the most gorgeous sprite work ever seen in an arcade, with massive, beautifully animated characters that would make modern pixel artists weep. The boss battles are epic encounters against screen-filling monsters. And yes, you can actually perform fatalities on, because apparently regular victories weren't dramatic enough. Despite its innovative features and stunning visuals, Red Earth remained relatively obscure, partly due to limited arcade distribution, and partly because players weren't quite ready for a fighting game that asked them to grind levels. However, those who've experienced it know that sometimes the best games are the ones that dare to be different.
Metamorphic Force!
Metamorphic Force, 1993. In 1993, Konami looked at Sega's Altered Beast and Golden Axe and thought, why not both? The result was Metamorphic Force, a beat-em-up that turns the whole transform into powerful beasts concept up to 11. The story follows 4 heroes chosen by the Greek goddess Athena to stop the evil king Death Shadow from his world domination plans, because apparently the best way to stop evil is to turn people into were-creatures. Each character brings their own transformation. Ban becomes a minotaur, Claude transforms into a white werewolf, Max turns into a black panther, and Ivan, predictably, becomes a bear. The combat system includes wrestling-style ground attacks, grapples, and smart bomb-style transformation attacks that clear the screen. A helpful rodent character, clearly inspired by Golden Axe's elves, shows up regularly to drop power-ups, health items, and transformation statues. The sprite work is gorgeous, featuring cartoon cell quality animation that rivals games like Aladdin on the Mega Drive. The game even includes impressive screen warping effects and a final battle in a faux 3D Colosseum. While the experience is relatively short, at around 20 minutes per playthrough, each of the 6 stages packs enough punch to keep players coming back for more. Despite being one of Konami's most visually impressive beat-em-ups, it remained relatively obscure, possibly because it wasn't tied to any popular franchise. However, those who've played it know that sometimes the best games are the ones where you can suplex enemies as a werebear. Mystic Warriors, 1993. Konami replaced Cowboys with neon-coloured ninjas and thus created Mystic Warriors, a game that makes other ninja titles look positively restrained in comparison. In the game, 5 ninja warriors must stop the evil Skull Kingdom because apparently, Kingdom of Slightly Concerning People wasn't menacing enough from taking over the world. Each character is color-coded like a Power Rangers knockoff, complete with their own elemental powers and enough attitude to fill a skate park. There's even a ninja who fights with a yo-yo because regular ninja weapons were apparently too mainstream. The gameplay takes everything great about Konami's run and gun formula and adds a hefty dose of ninja magic. You can wall jump, slide, throw shurikens, and unleash special attacks that fill the screen with more special effects than a Michael Bay move. The game introduces a unique charging system where holding the attack button builds up power for devastating ninja arts. Think Dragon Ball Z meets feudal Japan. Each level throws you into increasingly absurd scenarios, from fighting on top of speeding trains to battling inside active volcanoes. The sprite work is gorgeous, with characters moving as fluidly as water, and special effects that would make a Las Vegas light show jealous. The co-op play is particularly brilliant, allowing players to combine their powers for screen-clearing team attacks. The game even features branching paths and multiple endings, giving players reason to come back for more ninja action. Despite being one of Konami's most polished action games, it often gets overshadowed by its Western-themed sibling, Sunset Riders. However, those who've played it know that sometimes the best games are the ones that let you fight evil with both traditional ninja skills and questionably practical yo-yo techniques. Violent Storm, 1993. Yet in a post-apocalyptic 2020, which, ironically, turned out to be less bizarre than the actual 2020, you play as one of 3 heroes who look like they raided a professional wrestler's closet during a neon paint explosion. Wade rocks a mohawk that defies both gravity and common sense. Boris appears to have been designed by someone who really loved pro wrestling, and Kyle, well, Kyle looks like he wandered off from a beach volleyball tournament and accidentally ended up saving the world. The combat system is deeper than most fighting games of the era, featuring juggle combos, team attacks, and special moves that would make Street Fighter characters blush. You can pick up enemies and use them as human weapons, throw them into arcade machines, very meta, and even body slam them through tables that mysteriously appear in every stage. The game introduces a unique rage mode, where taking damage makes you stronger, because nothing says post-apocalyptic justice quite like glowing purple with anger. What makes Violent Storm criminally underrated is its absolutely bonkers presentation and attention to detail. The enemy designs are a parade of 90s stereotypes turned up to 11. You'll fight everything from punk rockers to circus strongmen, to a guy who looks suspiciously like a rejected Street Fighter character. The environments are interactive wonderlands where nearly everything can be destroyed, and the background music sounds like what would happen if a heavy metal band discovered synthesizers. Despite being one of Konami's most polished beat-em-ups, with some of the smoothest animations and most satisfying combat of its era, it remained relatively obscure. However, those who've played it know that sometimes the best games are the ones that aren't afraid to embrace their own ridiculousness with style. Wild West Cowboys of Mesa, 1992. The premise of this game is pure Saturday morning cartoon gold in an alternate Old West, where a mysterious comet turned all animals anthropomorphic, because why not? You play as one of 3 bovine lawmen, Marshal Moo Montana, Dakota Dude, and Colorado Kid. Each character is basically what would happen if you let a 10-year-old design cowboys after eating too many sugar cereals while watching Western movies. The gameplay takes everything great about Konami's beat-em-up formula and adds a healthy dose of Western flair. Instead of just punching and kicking, you can lasso enemies, perform rodeo-style throws, and even shoot your guns, though apparently these cowboys believe in non-lethal ammunition. The game features a unique stampede attack, where your character charges through enemies like an angry cow. Each stage is packed with Western movie tropes given a bovine twist, from saloon brawls to runaway minecart chases. The sprite work is gorgeous, with characters animated as smoothly as a well-oiled six-shooter. The attention to detail is impressive. Enemies react differently depending on where you hit them, and the environments are filled with interactive elements that would make any Western proud. The game even features some light platforming elements and hidden paths, giving players reason to explore every corner of Mesa. Despite being based on a relatively obscure cartoon series, the game stands on its own four hooves as a quality beat-em-up. Those who've played it know that sometimes the best games are the ones that aren't afraid to be utterly ridiculous while still delivering solid gameplay. Guardian Heroes, 1995. Treasure took traditional beat-em-ups and added tons of RPG elements, branching paths, and enough special moves to make Street Fighter jealous. The result was Guardian Heroes, a game that makes other side-scrolling brawlers look like they're playing in slow motion. Set in a fantasy world where ancient robots, medieval knights, and magic users coexist in glorious chaos, you control one of 5 heroes who accidentally stumble upon an ancient sword that's basically a cosmic trouble magnet. What follows is a story with more twists than a pretzel factory, featuring multiple paths and endings that would make visual novel writers take notes. Instead of the traditional single-plane combat, Guardian Heroes introduces a revolutionary 3-plane battle system. You can hop between foreground, middle ground, and background at will. Each character plays radically differently. Han is your sword and sorcery guy. Randy throws fireballs like they're going out of style. Nicole heals and punches with equal enthusiasm. Jinjaroo moves faster than common sense would allow. And Samuel just hits things really hard. The RPG elements let you level up your character's stats between stages. The branching story paths mean you need multiple playthroughs to see everything. And the combat system is deep enough to make fighting game veterans weep tears of joy. The game even features a versus mode where you can play as literally any character from the story mode, including bosses and NPCs. That's over 45 playable characters in versus mode. The sprite work is gorgeous, with special effects that push the Sega Saturn to its limits. Magic spells fill the screen with more colours than a Rainbow Factory explosion, and the animation is smoother than buttered silk. Despite being one of the most innovative beat-em-ups ever created, with features that games today still struggle to match, it remained relatively niche due to being a Saturn exclusive. However, those who've played it know that sometimes the best games are the ones that dare to reinvent the wheel and then add rocket boosters to it. Blood Bros, 1990. Imagine you're either a cowboy or a Native American, blood or thunder respectively, shooting your way through stages that start reasonably Western-like, but quickly escalate into pure chaos. 1 minute you're having a typical saloon shootout, the next you're taking down fighter planes and tanks. Yes, you read that right, tanks in the Wild West. Historical accuracy clearly took one look at this game and rode off into the sunset. Blood Bros lets you move between different positions on screen, adding a layer of strategy to the bullet-dodging mayhem. The game introduces a unique scoring system where shooting smaller targets or hitting enemies in rapid succession builds up your multiplier faster than a rattlesnake strike. You can even shoot objects in the environment to trigger chain reactions, like making a boulder roll down to crush enemies, or shooting a rope to drop a platform full of bad guys. The boss battles are particularly memorable. You'll face everything from traditional outlaws to circus performers to what appears to be a steampunk war machine. The game progressively gets more outlandish with each stage, as if the developers were in a competition to see who could come up with the most ridiculous scenario for a Western shooter. Despite being one of the most creative shooting games of its era, it remained relatively obscure. However, those who've played it know that sometimes the best games are the ones that aren't afraid to throw historical accuracy out the window in favor of pure, unadulterated fun. League Bowling, 1990. League Bowling takes the basic concept of rolling a ball down a lane and adds enough personality to fill a disco. The game features 3 different modes: Regulation for the purists, Bash for the speed demons, and Strike 90 for those who think regular bowling isn't challenging enough. Each mode comes with its own quirks and scoring systems that make every frame feel like a mini party. Instead of just mindlessly throwing balls, you need to consider power, angle, and spin with a unique control system that's easy to learn but surprisingly deep to master. The Flash mode is particularly brilliant. It adds a timing element where your power meter speeds up as you play, turning each frame into a test of nerves. The game even features a perfect mode, where the pins explode in a shower of particles when you nail a strike, because apparently regular pin physics weren't exciting enough. The presentation is delightfully over the top, with characters celebrating strikes like they've just won a championship fight. The sound design is particularly memorable. Nail a strike and you're treated to a celebration that sounds like a mini carnival broke out in the bowling alley. The multiplayer aspect is where the game truly shines, supporting up to 4 players in alternating turns, making it the perfect party game. Despite being one of SNK's most entertaining sports titles, it often gets overlooked in favor of their fighting games. However, those who've played it know that sometimes the best games are the ones that take a simple concept and turn it into pure arcade magic. B. Rat Boys, 1992. As with many beat-em-ups of the 90s, B. Rat Boys doesn't waste time on deep storytelling. The premise is simple. You skate, you punch, you move to the next section. Who needs Shakespeare when you have roller skating fighters and explosive action? The game offers 3 adrenaline-fueled stages, each split into multiple sections, ensuring that the action stays fresh and frenetic. And while the narrative may be thin, the energy of the game more than makes up for it. If DJ Boy felt clunky, B. Rat Boys is here to redeem the franchise. The skating physics are buttery smooth, letting you glide into combat with ease. The fast-paced mechanics are a dream for fans of the genre, with responsive controls and impactful attacks that make every punch, kick, and weapon swing feel satisfying. The game also introduces long-range weaponry, adding a new layer of strategy to the chaos. And let's not forget the soundtrack, an infectious mix of hip-hop beats that perfectly complements the street brawler vibe. You can take control of 3 characters, Top, P, and Pan. Each has their own flair, bringing a touch of variety to the gameplay. Whether you're playing as the nimble Top or the hard-hitting Pan, you'll find something to love in their distinct styles. The updated version, B. Rat Boys Special, adds some tweaks to keep things interesting. The title screen gets a refresh, enemy density is adjusted, and quirky new foes join the fray, including a kung fu master, a sumo wrestler, and a kabuki warrior. These updates enhance the already lively gameplay, making the special edition feel like a polished and expanded experience. Despite its improvements over DJ, B. Rat Boys remains largely forgotten, overshadowed by more famous beat-em-ups like Final Fight and Streets of Rage. It's a shame because this game's unique blend of smooth skating mechanics, high-energy combat, and hip-hop flair sets it apart from the crowd. Add in the obscure but groovy tracks from 3 Stories High, and you've got a game that truly embodies the spirit of the early 90s arcade scene. B. Rat Boys may not have hit consoles, but it hits all the right notes for fans of arcade beat-em-ups. If you ever come across this game in a retro arcade, drop a coin, strap on your virtual skates, and let the beatdowns begin. Clockwork Aquario, 1992. Developed by Westone in 1992 for Sega's System 18 arcade hardware, this ambitious game aimed to push 2D platforming to its limits. Unfortunately, it was shelved due to the rising dominance of 3D and fighting games in arcades. Fast forward 28 years, and Clockwork Aquario finally got its time in the sun thanks to a dedicated restoration effort by In Games and strictly limited games. And Wonder Boy 3, Monster Lair. Players choose between 3 quirky characters, Huck Rondo, El Moon, and Gush the Robot, to thwart the nefarious Dr. Hangyo's world domination plot. Each of the game's 5 stages is packed with colourful enemies, power-ups, and platforming challenges, culminating in dynamic boss battles where you can defeat enemies by stomping, slapping, or throwing them. The game introduces an unconventional pick-up-and-throw mechanic, allowing you to chain combos by hurling enemies in multiple directions, or even at each other. This mechanic, combined with the ability to grab and toss your co-op partner for strategic or chaotic fun, gives Clockwork Aquario a distinct edge. The invincibility gauge adds an extra layer of strategy, letting players briefly tank damage before replenishing it with items. However, its 2-hit point system a la Ghosts and Goblins keeps you on your toes. Despite being designed to showcase Sega's System 18 hardware, Clockwork Aquario faced an uphill battle during its initial location tests. Players at the time weren't ready to embrace its bright, cartoonish aesthetic and cooperative gameplay, especially with the allure of 3D graphics and one-on-one fighters stealing the spotlight. Its cancellation in 1994 marked the end of Westone's arcade endeavours, but the game's unfinished brilliance lingered in the minds of retro enthusiasts. The 2021 release brought Clockwork Aquario to modern consoles with restored visuals, refined mechanics, and cooperative multiplayer. However, while critics praised its gorgeous sprite art, nostalgic soundtrack, and frantic gameplay, they also noted its shortcomings: short length, occasional difficulty spikes, and a lack of substantial extra content. Still, for fans of retro platformers, this is a rare gem, feels like a lost chapter of the golden age of arcades. 1992. Irem took Spielberg's Hook and transformed it into an arcade brawler that lets up to 4 players duke it out through Neverland. While other versions of the game went the platforming route, the arcade edition decided that the best way to deal with pirates was with good old-fashioned street justice. The gameplay puts you in control of either Peter Pan or one of the Lost Boys, Ace, Pockets, Rufio, or Thudbutt, as they battle through 6 stages of pirate punching action. Unlike its console counterparts that focused on platforming and collecting items, the arcade version embraces full beat-em-up chaos, letting players team up to teach Hook's crew the meaning of Lost Boys don't mess around. While other versions went for child-friendly platforming, the arcade release channels the spirit of other Irem classics like Kung Fu Master. The multiplayer aspect was particularly brilliant, allowing 4 players to simultaneously create the kind of chaos that would make Captain Hook consider a career change. Despite being one of Irem's more polished beat-em-ups, it often gets overlooked in discussions about movie-based games, possibly because most people are more familiar with the console versions. However, those who've played it know that sometimes the best adaptations are the ones that dare to be different from their source material. Avengers in Galactic Storm, 1995. Avengers in Galactic Storm was a fighting game that arrived years before Marvel vs. Capcom made superhero fighters cool, based loosely, very loosely, on the Operation Galactic Storm comic storyline. The game pits Earth's mightiest heroes against the Kree Empire in one-on-one battles. The roster includes Captain America, who somehow fights with energy projectiles, Crystal, who moves like she's in a completely different game, Black Knight, actually pretty cool, and several Kree warriors that even die-hard Marvel fans might struggle to recognize. The gameplay introduces the unique charge power system, where holding buttons builds up energy for special moves. Think Dragon Ball Z power-ups meet Marvel superheroes. Each character can perform final actions, basically super moves that trigger elaborate cutscenes showing your hero unleashing their ultimate attack. The game even features mid-match character transformations, years before games like Bloody Roar made it popular, with characters sporting anime-inspired designs that look nothing like their comic counterparts. For better or worse, the game features some genuinely innovative ideas, like a guard brake system and air recovery mechanics that were ahead of their time. Despite being Marvel's first true arcade fighting game, it remained relatively obscure, possibly because it was too different from both traditional fighters and Marvel's usual style. Sometimes, the best games are the ones that dare to be weird, even if they don't quite stick the landing. Zero Team 1993, Ibu Kaihatsu, decided to take everything cool about 90s action movies, throw in some ninja tactics, and create a beat-em-up that would mysteriously disappear faster than its heroes. Meet the Zero Team, Ace, the all-rounder who fights like he's auditioning for every action movie ever. Speed, whose name perfectly describes his fighting style. Spin, the obligatory female fighter who can kick higher than most people can reach. And Big O, the muscle guy who apparently bench presses tanks for breakfast. Together, they're out to stop a criminal organization because, well, that's what elite fighting teams did in the 90s. Each character can perform running attacks, grab moves, and special techniques that look like they were choreographed by a Hollywood stunt team. The game features a unique power-up system where your character gets visibly angry and stronger as they take damage, because nothing says elite fighter quite like getting stronger when you're getting beaten up. The stages are fully interactive, letting you throw enemies through windows, off buildings, or into conveniently placed explosive barrels. Despite having some of the most polished combat mechanics in the genre, it remained relatively obscure due to limited distribution. Steel Force 1994, co-developed by Electronic Devices, Italy, and Eco Games. Barcelona, this 1994 top-down arcade shooter combines fast-paced combat with maze-like exploration. You take on the role of one of two Federation commandos, tasked with dismantling a ruthless space pirate operation, only to face an unexpected complication as alien monsters emerge to wreak havoc. The simple blast everything and survive premise becomes a thrilling race against time across hostile alien landscapes. Armed with an array of weapons, players must gun down waves of enemies, ranging from heavily armed pirates to grotesque alien creatures, while scavenging health packs, ammunition, and power-ups to stay alive. Stages are cleverly designed as intricate mazes, requiring players to search for exits under the constant pressure of enemy attacks and a ticking timer. The limited time mechanic adds urgency to exploration, forcing players to balance speed with survival. While it shares similarities with titles like Alien Breed, Steel Force distinguishes itself with relentless action and a heavier focus on combat. Its chaotic blend of pirate shootouts and alien infestations keeps the gameplay fresh, offering a satisfying challenge for fans of arcade shooters. Despite its engaging mechanics and atmospheric sci-fi setting, Steel Force didn't gain widespread recognition. Revived through platforms like Antstream, it's a hidden gem for those seeking adrenaline-pumping retro action. If you crave labyrinthine levels and explosive firefights, Steel Force delivers. Golden Axe, The Duel, 1994. Because Golden Axe, The Duel takes you through a story of descendants of the original Golden Axe heroes as they enter a tournament to stop a resurrected Death Adder who's stolen the legendary Golden Axe from Gilius Thunderhead's family. It's like a family reunion where everyone decides to settle their differences with swords instead of words. The gameplay takes heavy inspiration from both Street Fighter and Samurai Showdown, featuring a unique magic gauge system where collecting potions from those pesky thieves lets you power up for devastating special moves. Each character comes with 3 strength levels of slashes and kicks, and the camera dynamically zooms in and out during battle like a medieval dance of death. The game even keeps the series' trademark feature of elves dropping items, blue ones for magic potions, and green ones for health restoration. The character sprites are beefy and well animated, giving off strong Lord of the Rings vibes. While it might not have reached the heights of its contemporaries, it stands as one of the few fantasy-themed fighters of its era. Despite launching in a year dominated by 3D fighters and flashier titles, this hidden gem offered Saturn owners a unique take on the fighting game genre with its medieval fantasy setting and nostalgic nods to the original series. Twin Eagle 2, 1994. Unlike its relatively tame predecessor, Twin Eagle 2 throws you into missions that feel like they were ripped straight from the most over-the-top action films of the 90s. You're piloting an advanced attack helicopter through urban war zones, desert battlefields, and ocean-based fortresses, all while everything around you explodes with gratuitous enthusiasm. The plot? Something about rescuing hostages, but honestly, it's just an excuse to blow stuff up in increasingly spectacular ways. The gameplay introduces a unique weapon system where your helicopter can switch between different firing patterns mid-flight. Your arsenal includes spread shots, laser beams, and homing missiles that turn the screen into a fireworks display of destruction. The game's most innovative feature is its rescue system. You can actually pick up stranded soldiers and civilians, adding both points to your score and tension to your mission. Nothing adds pressure quite like trying to dodge bullet hell while carrying precious cargo. Sprite work is impressively detailed, with explosions that fill the screen and enemies that break apart piece by piece as you damage them. The sound design makes every explosion feel like a mini earthquake, with a soundtrack that would feel right at home in an 80s action movie. Despite having some of the most satisfying shooting mechanics in the genre, it remained relatively obscure. However, those who've played it know that sometimes the best shooters are the ones that aren't afraid to embrace their inner action movie. Shadow Force, 1993. The plot here follows 4 heroes: Ninja Kai, Swordfighter Bluenet, Muscleman Tengu, and Beastman Coyote, as they try to stop the evil Mr. Wong and his teaser organization from taking over the world with monsters. The story takes you through chemical plants, forests, and rooftops. Before things get weird, you actually get swallowed by a giant monster and have to fight your way out from the inside. Unlike traditional beat-em-ups with their simple 2-button setup, Shadow Force sports a whopping 6 buttons and plays more like a fighting game. You can perform high and low attacks, special moves stolen straight from popular fighters, and even block attacks by holding back. Features practically unheard of in the genre. The game's most unique mechanic is the ability to possess enemy characters by pressing the 6th button, letting you steal their movesets and special abilities. The possession system adds a layer of strategy rarely seen in brawlers, and the fighting game style controls offer depth that most beat-em-ups could only dream of. However, this complexity comes at a price. The game is brutally difficult, especially in later stages where bosses become damage sponges that require constant special move spam to defeat. Despite having some of the most innovative mechanics in the genre, it remained relatively obscure. Biomechanical Toy, 1995. Imagine if H.R. Giger designed a pinball machine while having fever dreams about cyborg organisms. That's Biomechanical Toy, a twisted fusion of organic and mechanical elements where every flipper looks like it might be alive and every bumper appears to be breathing. The table design features pulsating organs, mechanical tentacles, and enough grotesque imagery to make horror fans feel right at home. Instead of typical metal balls, you're shooting what appears to be some kind of cybernetic eyeball through channels that look suspiciously like veins and arteries. The game features multiple layers and secret passages, each more unsettling than the last. The unique mutation system lets you transform parts of the table by hitting specific targets, essentially making the whole playing field evolve as you play. It gives us both pinball physics and horror aesthetics. The sound design is particularly memorable, with organic squishing sounds mixing with mechanical clicks and whirs to create an atmosphere that's both fascinating and unsettling. The table layout is surprisingly deep, featuring multiple missions and objectives that require both skill and strategy to complete. Despite having some of the most unique visual design in arcade gaming, it remained relatively obscure. However, those who've played it know that sometimes the best games are the ones that dare to make players slightly uncomfortable while delivering solid gameplay mechanics. Hard Times, 1994. Step into the pinstripe suits of justice with Hard Times. A mob-themed shooter feels like a gritty remix of Blood Brothers, but with a classic detective spin. Released in arcades in 1994 by Playmark SRL, this Cabal-style game puts you in control of 2 hard-boiled detectives as they blast their way through an endless parade of gangsters, all set against the smoky backdrop of interwar North America. It's an arcade experience that oozes charm, chaos, and a hint of noir. If you've ever played Cabal or its cousin Blood Bros, you'll feel right at home with Hard Times. The game operates from a behind-the-shoulder perspective, where you control not just your character, but also their targeting reticle. The key to survival is mastering the art of multitasking. You move the reticle with the joystick while holding the fire button, directing a hailstorm of bullets toward the mobsters littering the screen. Simultaneously, you dodge roll to avoid enemy fire, and occasionally lob a grenade for a satisfying, screen-clearing explosion. One of the game's standout features is its destructible environments. Everything from barrels to windows, and even mob hideouts can be blown to smithereens, often revealing power-ups or bonus items. This adds a layer of strategy. Do you focus on clearing enemies, or take a moment to smash a few crates for upgrades? Either way, the chaos is constant, and the action never lets up. While Hard Times delivers solid, fast-paced gameplay, it never garnered the widespread recognition of its influences. Perhaps it's because it was overshadowed by bigger names in the genre, or maybe it's the fact that Playmark SRL wasn't exactly a household name in the arcade world. But make no mistake, Hard Times is an underrated gem, combines engaging mechanics with a charmingly gritty aesthetic. The mob-themed setting gives the game a unique flavour, swapping out the Wild West of Blood Bros for fedora-wearing gangsters and jazz-filled cityscapes. It's like stepping into a noir film, with you as the hard-nosed detective mowing down thugs one Tommy gun spray at a time. Virtua Fighter 1993. This game introduced 8 unique warriors, plus a chrome-plated boss named Dural, competing in a mysterious world tournament. Each fighter brought their own authentic martial arts style, from Akira's Hakioku Ken to Sarah's Jeet Kune Do. The plot involved some convoluted story about the Japanese army and ultimate martial arts. But let's be honest, people came for the polygons, not the plot. The gameplay stripped away the flash and focused on pure fighting fundamentals. Unlike its contemporaries that relied on fireballs and dragon punches, Virtua Fighter introduced an elegantly simple 3-button system: punch, kick, and block. But don't let that simplicity fool you. Combining these basics with different situations created a combat system deeper than a philosopher's midnight thoughts. The game even introduced the concept of ring outs, because sometimes the smartest way to win a fight is to let gravity do the work for you. The game was so revolutionary that Sony developers cited it as their inspiration to make the PlayStation focus on 3D graphics. Its wireframe and flat-shaded polygon graphics might look primitive today, but in 1993, they were mind-blowing enough to sell over 40,000 arcade units worldwide. Despite its massive influence on both fighting games and 3D graphics in gaming, many modern players overlook it in favour of its more polished successors. However, those who understand fighting games know that sometimes the most important revolutions start with a few simple polygons. Knuckle Bash 1993. Knuckle Bash is a professional wrestling soap opera on steroids. Released by Toplan in 1993, this side-scrolling brawler tasks players with taking down corrupt Mad Bull Group, a shady wrestling organization tainting the sport's reputation. With its wild roster of characters and unique gameplay structure, Knuckle Bash carves out a niche among its genre peers, despite being overshadowed by more mainstream titles like Final Fight and Streets of Rage. The gameplay is where Knuckle Bash stands out. Instead of endless waves of cannon fodder enemies, players battle stronger, mini-boss-like foes in each stage, lending every encounter a sense of urgency. You can pick from 3 initial wrestlers, including the flamboyant luchador El Plancha and the Elvis-like Michael Sobot, with 2 more characters, Mr. Hayate, a ninja, and Captain, a football player, unlockable as you progress. Each character brings unique moves and special attacks, reminiscent of Streets of Rage 2, where you can clear the screen with flashy power moves at the cost of health. The game's stages are as colourful as its characters, featuring zany boss fights and even mini-games between levels to keep things fresh. However, unlike most beat-em-ups, Knuckle Bash excludes weapons or environmental tools, focusing purely on hand-to-hand combat. Despite never receiving a home console port, this game remains a cult favourite for its charm and oddball humour. If you're a fan of retro beat-em-ups with a side of absurdity, this wrestling brawler is a hidden gem worth grappling. Warrior Blade, 1992. Taito's Warrior Blade, Rastan Saga. Episode 3 stands as one of arcade gaming's most ambitious beat-em-ups, featuring a massive dual-screen setup that makes every battle feel like an epic fantasy movie. This spiritual successor to Rastan throws players into the mystical land of Depon, where treasure and danger await in equal measure. The game puts you in control of 3 distinct warriors: Rastan, the muscle-bound hero who never met a sword he didn't like; Sophia, a nimble thief with attitude; and Dewey, an agile hireling who proves size isn't everything. Each character brings their own fighting style to the massive dual-screen battle, creating combat that's as strategic as it is spectacular. The gameplay innovates with a unique magic system centered around a mysterious wizard named Mahadi Dekaradi. Find his crystal ball and he'll follow you around, unleashing screen-clearing spells complete with dramatic incantations whenever you need them. The combat system rewards thoughtful play over button mashing, with context-sensitive attacks that change based on your position relative to enemies. The game includes auto-scrolling, dragon-riding sequences, mountain sliding segments, and branching paths that were rare for arcade games of the era. Despite pushing technical boundaries with its dual-screen setup and featuring some of the crispest graphics of 1992, it remained relatively obscure outside Japan. Silent Dragon, 1992. Taito's Silent Dragon may not hold the crown among its beat-em-up peers, but it earns a spot in the pantheon of quirky arcade brawlers. Developed by East Technology, best known for their less-than-stellar Double Dragon 3, Silent Dragon at least manages to clear that low bar. With 4 playable characters, Joe, Lee, a clear Jackie Chan homage, the Ninja Katu, and the bulky G.I. Sunny, the game offers a roster as eccentric as its gameplay. The plot is boilerplate 1980s action. Catherine, Joe's girlfriend and Sunny's sister, has been kidnapped by the nefarious Dr. Bio. The Doctor's visual design, a blend of pirate, Joker and B. Arthur, sets the tone for a game that revels in oddball charm. Over 5 stages, players punch, kick and explode their way through harbour docks, moving trucks, jungles, and the inevitable evil laboratory. Mechanically, Silent Dragon sticks to beat-em-up basics, but with a few odd twists. Players can wield unconventional weapons like swords, car batteries, and even dynamite connected to hilariously unsafe detonators. The bosses, however, steal the show. From Animal Cupid, a wrestler turned man-bat, to Frankenman, a hulking mutant, each encounter brims with personality. The final boss, Dr. Bio, reveals his true form as a chainsaw-wielding robot, capping off the absurdity. While its graphics and music fall short of Taito's usual standards, the game's sheer weirdness gives it some charm. If you've mastered genre heavyweights like Turtles in Time, Silent Dragon offers an amusing, if not essential, addition to your beat-em-up adventures. Riding Fight, 1992. The 1990s were a golden era for arcade innovation, and Riding Fight stands out as one of the era's underrated experiments. Released by Taito in 1992, this futuristic, crime-themed beat-em-up dared to break genre conventions by blending high-speed action with traditional brawler mechanics. In a time when classics like Final Fight and Streets of Rage ruled the arcades, Riding Fight offered something refreshingly different. The game cast players as bounty hunters, Burn Bowie and Keith Jager, tasked with taking down the criminal syndicate Death Serpent. The twist? Instead of battling enemies on foot, players engage in high-octane combat while riding hoverboards. This unique premise creates an exhilarating blend of hand-to-hand combat, hoverboard acrobatics, and frantic pacing that sets the game apart from its contemporaries. Combat features punches, kicks, and the ability to wield weapons dropped by defeated enemies, adding a layer of strategic chaos. Health power-ups ensure players can survive the relentless waves of rival hoverboarders, futuristic vehicles, and menacing bosses. Whether playing solo or with a friend, Riding Fight delivers a kinetic co-op experience that feels ahead of its time. Despite its innovation, Riding Fight never garnered the recognition it deserved, overshadowed by more traditional arcade hits. Yet, its blend of sci-fi aesthetics, fast-paced gameplay, and genre-defying mechanics make it a hidden gem worth revisiting for fans of 90s arcade creativity.
Yo,
G.I. Joe, 1992. Konami transformed G.I. Joe into a run-and-gun masterpiece that makes other licensed games look like cheap cash grabs. This isn't just another movie tie-in, it's what happens when developers actually understand what makes the source material great. The game throws you into the thick of the action as Duke, Snake Eyes, Scarlet, Roadblock, each packing enough firepower to make Cobra Commander reconsider his career choices. Your mission? Stop Cobra from doing what they do best, trying to take over the world with increasingly ridiculous schemes involving weather machines, giant robots, and enough military hardware to start a small war. The gameplay perfectly captures the spirit of the cartoon with a unique weapon system that lets you switch between character-specific firearms and signature moves on the fly. Snake Eyes can slash through enemies with his sword, Roadblock lugs around a massive heavy machine gun, and Scarlet proves why crossbows never went out of style. The game even features vehicle segments where you pilot iconic G.I. Joe vehicles like the Snowcat. The sprite work is gorgeous, capturing the look of the animated series perfect. Boss battles feature memorable Cobra commanders like Destro and the Baroness, each with their own unique attack patterns and vehicles. The co-op play is particularly brilliant, allowing players to combine their firepower to take down Cobra's forces. Despite being one of Konami's most polished licensed games, it often gets overlooked in discussions about great arcade games. R-Type Leo, 1992. In 1992, Nanao created what would become the most controversial entry in the R-Type series. Originally developed as a completely different game, R-Type Leo was adopted into the franchise late in development, creating a shoot-'em-up that broke almost every rule that made R-Type famous. The game takes place on Eden, a mechanical planet whose supercomputer core has gone rogue and decided that humanity needs a serious timeout. Gone are the bioorganic Bido enemies, replaced with mechanical foes that look like they came from a more colourful universe. Your mission? Pilot the R9 Leo and remind this uppity AI who built it in the first place. The gameplay throws out the series' iconic Force Pod system and replaces it with 2 Cybit satellites that dance around your ship like hyperactive bodyguards. These bits aim backward when you move forward and vice versa, creating a unique dynamic shooting system that feels more like a dance than traditional combat. Power-ups cycle through different colours, letting you choose your weapon loadout rather than leaving it to chance. The visuals are stunning, with a rich colour palette that creates scenes like bright blue planets, contrasting with space station wreckage, and lush jungles hiding beneath desert ruins. The soundtrack pumps out house-influenced beats that start with a digitised countdown, making every stage feel like a high-energy dance party in space. Despite being considered the black sheep of the R-Type family, it stands as one of the most visually impressive and accessible entries in the series. Monster Maulers, 1993. Released in 1993 by Konami, Monster Maulers, known as Kyukyoku Sentai Dadandan in Japan, is a fascinating and underrated gem from the golden age of arcade game. Blending elements of beat-em-ups and fighting games, it pits players against giant, over-the-top monsters in intense one-on-one battles. With its unique premise and vibrant design, Monster Maulers remains a standout example of Konami's penchant for experimental gameplay during the era. Players assume the roles of Kotetsu, Ann, and Eagle, heroes of the ultimate task force, as they take on the dastardly Happy Droppers and their monstrous creations. Each protagonist brings a distinct fighting style, from Kotetsu's balanced brawling to Ann's martial arts agility and Eagle's powerhouse wrestling moves. Whether playing solo or co-op, players can unleash powerful secret moves, especially in 2-player mode, adding depth to the chaotic combat. The game's true stars, however, are its bosses, a dazzling roster of imaginative monsters. From a colour-changing dragon in a Norwegian cave to a plant monster lurking in the Amazon, and even a moai head with arms, each encounter is a visual, mechanical spectacle. The bizarre final battles against the Happy Droppers, culminating in a showdown with the cosmic tank piloted by their leader, ensure every moment is unforgettable. With 2 potential endings, vibrant stages, and quirky references to Konami classics like Gradius, Monster Maulers is a delightful, if underappreciated, arcade experience. Its sheer creativity and high-energy gameplay make it a must-try for fans of 90s arcade ingenuity. Storm Knight Slashers, 1993. Think Streets of Rage meets Universal Monsters with a healthy dose of 90s attitude thrown in for good measure. The game follows three unique monster hunters. Jake Hunter, a cyborg American with mechanical arms who apparently thought regular arms weren't punchy enough. Christopher Smith, an English vampire hunter who rocks a mullet that would make any 80s rock star jealous. And Honghua Zhao, a Chinese martial artist who proves size doesn't matter when you can throw fireballs. The gameplay introduces a robust combat system that puts other beat-em-ups to shame. Each character comes with their own elemental powers and an extensive moveset that includes screen-clearing special attacks. The horror theme isn't just cosmetic. You'll battle through hordes of zombies, vampires, werewolves, and even face off against lookalikes of classic movie monsters like Dracula and Frankenstein's creation. The sprite work is gorgeously detailed, with well-animated characters and interesting backgrounds that capture the game's spooky atmosphere. The soundtrack, composed by Tomoyoshi Sato, stands as one of the best in the genre, mixing diverse styles with catchy compositions. Despite having some of the most innovative combat mechanics in the genre and a unique horror theme, it remained relatively obscure. However, those who've played it know that sometimes the best beat-em-ups are the ones that aren't afraid to mix monsters with martial arts. In the Hunt, 1993. Before they created Metal Slug, the geniuses at Irem crafted In the Hunt, a submarine shooter that makes other aquatic games look like kiddie pools. This isn't just another underwater shooter, it's a masterclass in pixel art and level design that would influence gaming for decades to come. You pilot the experimental submarine Granvia, battling through flooded cities, frozen seas, and underwater caverns as part of a resistance force fighting against the Dark Anarchy Society. The plot might sound generic, but the execution is anything but. Every stage feels like a hand-drawn, apocalyptic painting come to life. The gameplay revolutionizes the horizontal shooter formula by giving your submarine realistic physics. Unlike typical shooters where you zip around effortlessly, your sub has weight and momentum. You'll need to master both torpedoes for underwater combat and surface-to-air missiles for aerial threats. The game features a unique two-player mode where coordination is key. One sub can clear mines while the other handles enemy forces. The pixel art is absolutely gorgeous, with underwater scenes that look like they're straight out of a high-budget anime. Every stage tells its own story through background details. Sunken cities, frozen battleships, and industrial complexes all hint at a larger world. Despite being the spiritual predecessor to Metal Slug and featuring some of the most impressive artwork of its era, it often gets overlooked. Mad Shark, 1993. Released by Illuma in 1993, Mad Shark is a top-down arcade shooter that delivers classic, fast-paced, bullet-dodging action reminiscent of the Raiden series. Players pilot a sleek fighter jet tasked with obliterating swarms of enemy aircraft and ground units across visually striking stages. The straightforward plot of battling through waves of foes to save the day is secondary to the relentless, adrenaline-pumping gameplay that defines this arcade gem. At its core, Mad Shark sticks to the tried-and-true formula of the shoot-'em-up genre while adding its own flair. Players can wield a default autocannon with a wide attack range, a powerful spread shot, or a devastating straight laser, allowing for strategic weapon choices depending on the situation. The game's bomb mechanic offers a last-ditch lifeline, clearing the screen of enemies and projectiles in moments of desperation. The combination of vertical and horizontal scrolling stages adds variety and keeps the action dynamic, while the power-up system ensures there's always an edge to gain as you progress. Despite its solid gameplay and engaging weapon variety, Mad Shark remains an underrated title, perhaps overshadowed by bigger names like Raiden or 1942. It has quietly gained cult status among retro gaming enthusiasts. The recent Arcade Archives release breathes new life into this forgotten classic, with customizable settings and global scoreboards that challenge modern players to master its high-stakes action. For fans of classic arcade shooters, Mad Shark is a hidden treasure waiting to resurface. Alpha Mission 2. Last but not least, we have a vertical shooter that tried to revolutionize power-up systems but ended up creating beautiful chaos in the process. Alpha Mission 2 puts you in control of an armored scrum object, a spacecraft that apparently believes in having multiple personalities. The gameplay introduces a complex arsenal system that would make an accountant's head spin. Your ship comes equipped with both air-to-air lasers and ground missiles, similar to Xevious, but that's where the simplicity ends. The real star is the unique armor system. Collect 3 matching pieces of the same armor type, and your ship transforms into a temporarily invincible killing machine with special powers. There are 11 different armor types, from basic laser upgrades to the spectacular Phoenix armor that turns your ship into a fiery bird of destruction. The game features a fascinating economic system where you collect currency to buy complete armor sets between stages. The boss battles are particularly memorable, especially Stage 2's massive mothership that you must destroy piece by piece before infiltrating its interior. Despite having some of the most innovative power-up mechanics in shooter history, the game's complexity sometimes works against it. And there you have it, a wild ride down memory lane, 50 underrated gems from the golden era of 90s arcades. Whether it was side-scrolling beat-em-ups, adrenaline-pumping racers, or the quirky games that made us ask, wait, what am I even playing? The 90s had it all. These were the games that quietly stole our quarters and carved out a niche in our hearts, even if they didn't make it to the big leagues of gaming fame. If you're feeling nostalgic, why not fire up an emulator or dig out an old arcade machine if you're lucky enough to have one and relive the magic? Or better yet, head to a retro arcade if you can find one, because there's nothing quite like the feel of smashing buttons and hearing that chaotic symphony of beeps, boops, and victory tunes. The beauty of these games lies in their charm, creativity, and the raw fun they did without needing hyper-realistic graphics or deep narratives. They were all about living in the moment, just you, the joystick, and a crowd of cheering strangers hyped over your high score. Which of these hidden treasures is your favourite? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more gaming goodness. Until next time, happy gaming!